Hi, my name is Sara Arms, and with the Turner Syndrome Foundation, I am taking part in their current YouTube campaign, which basically is answering questions about Turner Syndrome. All of us have written our own questions, and we are going to answer them in hopes of promoting awareness about Turner Syndrome. So I have some questions right here, and we're going to get to it. So the first question that I have is, how were you diagnosed with Turner Syndrome? So when I was in the 8th grade, I started getting sick. I wasn't meeting the basic puberty milestones. And so they ran tests. My primary care physician ran tests. And one of those was for Turner Syndrome, since I wasn't meeting those, those physical puberty marks. So through that, we discovered that I was mosaic Turner. And in hindsight, there were a few things that definitely indicated that I had Turner Syndrome, which we will address later. But that was how I was originally diagnosed, and ever since I've been in the care of wonderful endocrinologists, gynecologists. My primary care physician's fantastic, so yeah, that was the beginning of that journey. What are my Turner Syndrome related challenges? So really, I think it comes down to my hormonal challenges. Most of mine are physical, albeit very minor and very well managed. But currently I'm working with a reproductive endocrinologist to help mitigate some of the hormonal symptoms that I'm having. So like hot flashes, insomnia, basically my hormone levels aren't where they need to be. So I also have a cyst on my pituitary gland that they have to keep monitored to make sure that it doesn't grow. That also kind of attributes to the hormonal issues that I have. So some other challenges. I stink at math. I cannot do math. I mean, it's a block in my brain that just, anything I'm pulling out the calculator for. And I thankfully, I had the help of some wonderful teachers and tutors. Up until in college, I didn't have to take math anymore, thank God. But to get me through, it a lot of extra help and a lot of hard work. So, next question. Are you able to work and drive? Yes. Something that I wasn't aware of, something that I had to educate myself on, I think because of my specific diagnosis, is how Turner Syndrome affects your eyes. I was not aware that so many patients were not able to, because of depth perception, they were able to drive or ride a bike. They had to go through eye therapy. And thankfully, I didn't have any of that, and I'm able to work and drive. So next question. What was or is the hardest thing about Turner Syndrome that you have been through? I've been very fortunate in that my Turner Syndrome does not affect the majority of my day-to-day life. My medications and my diet and all of that mitigate a lot of the things that I have been going through. But I do think that as I'm getting older, it is definitely changing. As far as, when I started my treatments when I was in the 8th grade, it was a very certain set, and I expected to go through changes, when I did because I participated in a growth hormone treatment. And so I expected to have symptoms related to that. And I think now that I am going through a kind of a second wave of hormonal issues, I think that has been kind of not necessarily hard because my doctors are amazing, but it kind of just reinforces the fact that you really have to advocate for yourself, and you really do have to make sure that all of your physicians are working together and that they are proactive and making sure that you are healthy and staying on top of it, When I went through college, I really didn't pay attention to my symptoms, and I think now that I'm addressing them head on and trying to work through them, as far as, the insomnia, the hot flashes and all of that, yeah. Next question. So what helped you the most in school? Really, it was a small school environment. I have been very fortunate that the schools that I've attended have been very small. It was very small. I think the biggest ratio that I've ever, I might have been one of 25 students, and that was I was in middle school, and then in high school it was even smaller. Like, I probably had 10 to 15 people in each class, but that was a very popular class. If I was taking an elective, it might have been 4 or 5 people, and that was the same in college. And I don't think that I would have gotten that same experience if I hadn't had more one-on-one connection with my professors. I also was very proactive in seeking out help from my professors and in going to tutors, especially in college. I went to Berry College, and the academic center provided free tutoring. So especially, I think it was really math and science. I had to take 1 math and 2 sciences. And I just had to keep myself accountable and understand that, I had to take a certain level of precautions and make sure that I was in the right place with my education. And thankfully, I was able to graduate college with a great GPA because of the small school setting and because of the wonderful people and tutors that I met along the way. What are my goals? So I love talking about goals. Yeah, I'm a very list and future oriented person. I kind of want it all laid out. So I would say, so most of my goals, I think, are job and career related. I do a lot of media and video production and video editing. By trade, I also do theater. And so I think all of my goals would basically be along the lines of creating more media content and, climbing up that ladder and really being able to provide quality content, maybe on my own, maybe for myself, or maybe for potential clients. That has been something that I've absolutely loved. I discovered in high school that I loved media and that I loved anything having to do with that. And then in college is when I honed in, because I thought I wanted to be a journalist for so long. And then I ended up when I had almost finished, changing my mind and wanting to study visual communication. So anything having to do with the media or theater. As far as personal goals, I really love to pour myself into my friends and my family. And so I think I really want to be able to provide for my friends and for my family and for everybody that has helped me along with my life journey. I want to give back to them, now that I'm in a better capacity too. What would be your dream job? So, as I mentioned earlier with my goals, I do a lot of video production and theater, and I think my dream job would be running a theater. Running a theater or running a video production company, and creating online content, I think would be so fun. What are my hobbies? So I tend to really involve myself with my work, and really up until recently, because I've tried to work on this, My hobbies were my work. If I wasn't working, or if I wasn't doing something that was advancing my career, I really wasn't doing anything other than hanging out with friends or, doing those types of things. But I've realizing that was an issue. I really tried to put more effort into finding things that I enjoyed again. And that really has been stuff around the arts. So I've started watercoloring, which I absolutely love. I read. Right now I'm trying to practice the discipline of writing, because I really do love writing. I'm a content creator at heart. I worked, in college for a magazine, and creating content for the magazine, whether that be video, whether that be copy, I absolutely loved it. So doing that as a hobby, I have a really cool set of friends that love to write scripts, and so getting involved with that would be so fun. All right, next question. What was your Turner syndrome treatment plan? So since I was diagnosed later, I pretty much started treatment as soon as I was diagnosed. I had a very, very small stature, which is pretty much a given with Turner syndrome. And they were worried about my bone density. And so they put me on growth hormone, not necessarily to get me any taller, because I was already 13, 14 at the time, but really to help with bone density. I am not a medical professional whatsoever, but my understanding was the growth hormone was really able to help with my bones and making sure that the density was where it needed to be, and not necessarily growth. I don't know how much growth is facilitated with other patients, but for me, I know it was specifically for bone density. And then they started me on pills of estrogen and progesterone. And with those pills, I was having symptoms so far as I had terrible, terrible mood swings. And my periods were absolutely horrendous. And I was just a physical and emotional wreck for like 10 days at least. And so because of that, I did some research and I decided to ask my doctors about potentially taking birth control, because that is the recommended way to go about hormone replacement, at least for a good bit of patients with Turner syndrome. And so that is currently what I am on. However, now I am exhibiting certain hormonal symptoms that I'm working with some specialists on to see if a different medication or therapy is going to help get rid of the symptoms that I'm having. So I'm kind of in the middle of that negotiation right now. So yeah, but I would definitely say, as far as treatment goes, and again, I am not a professional, but the Turner syndrome community is so diverse. They are so diverse in different treatments and different needs that every patient has. So definitely work with I recommend working with as many specialists as possible. I never hesitated to get a second opinion or to ask if there are any other professionals that I need to be seeing. For me, I saw my endocrinologist for all of my issues up through college, and just recently did I discover that there are a whole other array of doctors, gynecologists, reproductive endocrinologists, that have very specific training to help with different symptoms. So don't hesitate to ask your doctor what other specialists that you could be seeing. What are some day-to-day instances of how you've catered your life to your Turner syndrome challenges? I think I would say the biggest one is all of my favorite flatware in my apartment is on the bottom shelf where I can reach it easily. So like, you know, plates, bowls, and all of my favorite, I'm like a mug fanatic. Any type of coffee mug, I'm all over it. I love coffee. Gotta be careful about drinking that much caffeine, but I love coffee. I love anything, you know, tea. So all of my favorite mugs are like right where I can reach them, because, you know, I can't reach that top shelf. Having a calculator on hand, you know, thankfully I have my cell phone, but definitely having a calculator on hand. One of the biggest things that's come up recently in my day-to-day life is I was prescribed hearing aids. You know, Turner syndrome is very, hearing loss, degenerative hearing is very common with Turner syndrome patients. And so when I started to lose my hearing, I realized it was only a matter of time. It's been about 4 years since I realized that there was something. But just a few months ago, I was prescribed hearing aids, and I absolutely love them. And they really have changed my quality of life. You know, people don't have to yell at me from across the room, or if someone needs something from another room in the apartment, or, you know, in an office space, or having a conversation in a restaurant, that has completely changed everything. How does Turner syndrome affect your romantic and platonic relationships? So first thing, I have a boyfriend. His name is Andrew. He's currently behind the camera. And I would say the biggest thing romantically would be having that conversation. You know, before Andrew and I even began dating, I had the conversation with him that was like, hey, look, I have this thing called Turner syndrome, and this is what it means. And I laid out kind of, you know, we probably would not be able to have biological children. Like, that's not in the cards. And the different hormonal things that I was going through. You know, I didn't want, you know, to take out my mood swings on him, or, you know, or that, you know, medical debt might be something in our future. If there was ever something that I needed to have done medically, or procedure or whatnot. As far as my platonic relationships, and this is a thing about getting older, no one really had to know until recently, or until I showed symptoms. And I think a lot of it has to do with, like, you know, people will come up and be like, oh my gosh, now that I'm in a very healthy, committed relationship, you know, preparing for the questions, you know, from your friends or other people that, you know, oh, when are you guys gonna have kids? Or, you know, or just straight up, you know, maybe I'm having a hot flash and I'm sitting here like, or that, once I explain what's going on, everybody is super accommodating and super sweet. But I found that, for me, I normally don't address it until something comes up. And maybe that is a complex for me of like, oh, I don't want my diagnosis to affect the way that other people see me unless it's super necessary. But whether you choose to be upfront about your diagnosis, you know, as soon as you meet somebody, you know, which is what I did with Andrew because of the feelings involved between us, or whether you have relationships where, you know, they don't need to know. Whether you are proactive in telling people, or whether you decide to keep your diagnosis to yourself, that is up to you, and I believe that is very important. So to wrap all this up, I have one final question. Why do you think awareness of Turner syndrome is important? And I addressed this earlier. I think that advocating awareness is going to promote advocating for yourself, and it's going to promote communication between other patients, and maybe having different ways of, wow, I'm really struggling with whether or not to go to college, or I'm really struggling with education, I'm really struggling with the symptoms that I'm having. I believe that promoting awareness of Turner syndrome is going to connect more patients and more caregivers, which can only make us more powerful by numbers and giving each other ideas.